I want to make an update on the OLED plasma TV comparisons because if you've been watching me for a while, you see that I was bashing the OLED at the beginning, like, oh, this is trash, the colors on the plasma are so much better. And I've always been honest in telling you, hey, I'm not an expert. This is my opinion, this is what I see. So that doesn't mean I'm right. It's like somebody walks into the store to buy these TVs and they are all in vivid mode. So that looks better for people, okay? And that's not necessarily more accurate or more correct. So here's what I think is going on when I do a comparison between the plasma and the OLED on SDR. I learned that these OLED TVs are able to clamp the color gamut. So what that means is when the TV detects SDR, it's going to close the color space to Rec 709, to that SDR color space, and it's going to display the colors accurately for SDR. So the plasma TV has a little bit more coverage than Rec 709. So it is not considered a wide color gamut display, at least my plasma, because to be considered a wide color gamut, you need to cover a certain percentage of BT 2020. Okay, so my TV is probably going beyond Rec 709, but not a lot more. So not a lot more for me to detect that the colors are widely incorrect. Okay, so because of that, on SDR the plasma is looking more saturated. Okay, it's looking more attractive to me, but it's not saturated enough for it to look bad. So it looks fantastic to me. I don't care. It looks amazing. But now I understand what's going on because I was basically with the plasma and the OLED side by side. I was basically increasing the saturation of the OLED. So you can imagine, I know nothing about TVs, okay? I have this plasma which looks amazing. I buy the OLED, I come here, turn on a game, and I am increasing the saturation of the OLED, and I cannot match the colors of the plasma. No way. I was playing with the colors without knowing anything. And no way, the plasma was looking more saturated and more beautiful to me. And I understand now why. Because on SDR, the OLED is clamping that color gamut, is closing the color gamut to Rec 709, and the plasma is not. The plasma is going beyond that. So as a consequence, it's giving me more vivid colors. So the OLED, if I put the OLED on native color gamut on SDR, then I get the same plasma look. And that's what I was sharing. After I learned how to do that, I was sharing that, hey, now the OLED is looking like the plasma. And that's why. So when you have this OLED on native color gamut, it's going to be incorrect. It's going to be inaccurate. If you are on SDR, because what's happening is basically you are no longer on the BT20, on the Rec 709 color space. So the TV is probably on DCI-P3, which is the native color gamut of the TV. And as a consequence, if you use native color gamut on SDR, you are going to get incorrect colors that are overly saturated, but you might like that. So for gaming, it's not really a big deal. If you like native color gamut, if you like overly saturated colors, enjoy, brother. Who cares? But I do have to, I do want to do this follow-up video, and I'm gonna have this video on the link of that one because I want people to get a better understanding and a little bit better information because I was really bashing the OLED without knowing, but it was my opinion, and I still think that it looks better and I like it more. But I'm gonna tell you the main reason why I was so unhappy and why I was making these comparisons more than the colors is the motion clarity. The motion clarity. Because at 60 hertz with this plasma TV, I was so happy. I didn't I was never thinking about motion clarity. I was happy just playing at 60 hertz. All the games look colorful. I move the camera. I can see everything. It is responsive. So then I get this OLED and I can no longer play at 60 frames. Now I need a super expensive high-end computer to push over 100 frames. So, and then I wasn't able to use black frame insertion because it was too dim. Later I learned how to use that and get the brightness by accessing the service menu and doing all those things. So that was the main reason why I was so unhappy with it. So now I understand this OLED TV. It does have a wider color gamut, so it is able to give you more saturated colors, but still the plasma looks to me the main difference of the plasma for me in comparison with the OLED, and this is a subjective opinion. Okay, the plasma colors, they look more like a paint. So if you talk with a painter, somebody that paints, oil paintings and all that stuff, they have more than one layer of paint. So as a consequence, by having multiple layers, the people who know about painting, they feel something. They feel that the colors are more present, more in your face. So the plasma picture, in my subjective opinion, looks more thick. is the description. The OLED picture looks more thin. It's like it's not. It doesn't have several layers of colors. That's just subjective. Okay, so the plasma for me looks more beautiful, like a solid color on the screen. Let's say a green blue color solid on the screen. If I compare the plasma with the OLED, that is my perception. The OLED color looks thin, the plasma color looks thicker, so it has more impact. I like it more. So yeah, that's my subjective opinion. I still like the colors more on. They are incorrect. They are overly saturated, but I like them more, and I especially like the motion clarity. The OLED motion clarity is very good if you can push 120 hertz black frame insertion motion pro high. It is perfect, but the problem is I cannot achieve that level of performance in most games. But that's not the problem with the TV. But yeah, and also it's not bright enough. But accessing the service menu and removing the restrictions, yeah, it is amazing, and yeah, it is very, very good. But yeah, I just wanted to make that update. I understand now why I was not able to match the colors. I still prefer the colors of the plasma, and if you give me a 4K plasma TV, and if you give me a 4K plasma TV that can do maybe 90 hertz or 100 hertz or even 120, that would be amazing. 120 plasma TV with G-Sync, 4K plasma 120 with G-Sync, it would be just perfect. And I don't care about HDR. If you give me that quality, I don't care about HDR. Of course, HDR is better than SDR, 100%. But I much rather have the motion clarity, because motion clarity for me is more important. So if I get beautiful colors, great contrast, so the image looks amazing, and you give me great motion clarity, I'm going with that instead of 2000 nits, big brightness, OLED with bad motion clarity. The problem of the OLED is sample and hold. So when you move the camera, it looks blurry. So the OLED at 120 frames, 120 hertz, it doesn't look better than 60 hertz with Motion Pro high. It looks about the same. So why would you spend so much more computing power to push that frame rate? Why? It makes no sense. So what I would like these companies, these is to invent a technology like the plasma TV, a different technology, because maybe the plasma is too expensive to manufacture, and that's why they probably died. So LCDs are more profitable, so that's what happened. It's all about profits. But what I want these companies is to invent a technology that is an impulse display. Like for example, the plasma, what it does, and the reason why it looks so fluid in movement, is because the pixels are actually turning on and off very fast, like 10 times per second. So those 60 hertz are 60 images per second, but each frame is displayed 10 times on and off. That's why it's able to clear that persistent blur. And that's why it looks so amazing in movement. So imagine the image being displayed 10 times per second instead of 60 hertz, instead of 60 times per second. Give me 100 or 120. It would be 120 by 10, so that would be 1200. So imagine, you can only imagine the image clarity you can get with that. It would be insane image clarity. So you give me that with G-Sync, and it will be easy because the panel is natively doing that. There's no Motion Pro, there's no other complications. So it would be very easy to do G-Sync on a panel like that. So yeah, that's not gonna happen, but I wish these companies, they understand how important is the motion clarity, and they either give me an OLED that's bright enough for HDR and has Motion Pro with variable refresh rate. That would be my next TV. If they invent an OLED TV that can do, for example, an OLED TV that can do 2000 nits peak brightness, so it's bright enough for, let me cover the, I hate commercials, just gonna turn it off. So imagine an OLED TV that can do 2000 nits peak brightness and has Motion Pro, so it has that black frame insertion, and it is variable. It can give you variable refresh rate with black frame insertion at the same time. So of course, by using Motion Pro, the peak brightness is going to be cut down in half probably. But that's still a 1000 nit display that you can use for HDR. But there has to be an HDR Motion Pro adjustment. There has to be an adjustment because you're going to also affect the midtones and the shadow detail a little bit. They can do it. I am sure it is possible to get. It doesn't have to be 2000 nits. I mean, even a 1000 nit display right now, the G2 for example, the G2 can do black frame insertion at 120. It cannot, but I'm sure it is possible. They can give you that same peak brightness with a black frame insertion that is variable on the refresh rate. Or even if it's not, let's say it is not possible to give you a variable refresh rate with black frame insertion, I am sure it is possible to give you custom resolutions, so custom refresh rates for black frame insertion. So let's say you have, right now we have on the C1 we have 50, we have 100, we have 50, 60. Well, at 50 the flickering is too bad, but we have 60, 100 and 120. They can give you, custom, the ability to do custom refresh rates. So you can do 65, 70, 75, 80. So depending on the game, you're gonna use that. So imagine that with 1000 nits peak brightness that is going to be cut down to 600, so, or a little bit more. So that's still HDR. 600 nits display is still HDR, but there has to be an adjustment to compensate for that loss. So I am sure LG can figure that out and give you an adjustment. What I mean by an adjustment is when you turn on Motion Pro, you're losing peak brightness, but you're also affecting the midtones and a little bit the shadow detail, but very small, the shadow detail. So there has to be a gamma adjustment. There has to be a gamma adjustment, and I'm sure LG can figure that out. So that would be my next TV. If you can give me more than 600 nits with black frame insertion and give me if it's not variable, ideally it would be variable black film insertion, but if it's not, at least give me the options to do a custom refresh rate for black film insertion, and give me an adjustment, a gamma adjustment, so I can still enjoy the same HDR effect. So what I'm looking for is an HDR display that I can do, which I can get good motion clarity at any given refresh rate, and I still get the same HDR effect as if it was just a 600 nits OLED HDR display. That's what I'm looking for. So if I can get that, that would be my next TV. I mean, that could even be a firmware update on this C1, to be honest. But they're not gonna do that, because I mean, this C1 has an Evo panel, so that's the same panel that is used on the G1 and on the G2. Well, the G2 not, because the G2 has the EX panel. But they can unlock 1000 nits peak brightness on this one. I'm sure it's possible. It would be a firmware update, but they're not gonna give you that. But